You're listening to the My Simplified Life podcast, and this is episode number 133. Welcome to the My Simplified Life podcast, a place where you will learn that your past and even your present don't define your future. Regardless of what stage of life you're in, I want you to feel inspired and encouraged to pursue your dreams, simplify your life, and start taking action today. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, and I'm excited to share my stories and life lessons with you while taking you on my own journey. This is My Simplified Life. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac. So as you know, my main business is podcast pitching. Some people call it a podcast booking agency. Others call it a podcast publicist. Whatever the name is, the service is the same. I am pitching you to be interviewed on different podcasts. And there's becoming more and more of these type of agencies, services, individuals who are offering you this service that are popping up because podcasts are becoming more and more popular. So I wanted to talk about today what it looks like in the business and what you should be looking for if you're interested in hiring a podcast booking agency to get you interviewed on podcasts. One of the reasons that I want to do this is because if you've been following me, if you've been listening, you know that I am a truth teller. I love to tell the truth. I love to give you the behind the scenes, what's going on. And I really don't hold any secrets, especially when it comes to my business, to podcast pitching, to what's needed to be successful in landing interviews. And I often get interview requests in my email for my own show. And what pains me the most is when it's another podcast booking agency who simply is rude, does horrific follow-ups. And I've shared this before on some of the ones that I've received. And it's just the simple fact that there's a human being who is paying these individuals for this service, and they don't even know what is being presented on their behalf. I feel that's really unfair because podcast pitching is not a cheap service. I know that my offering comes with a price, but I also know that it's worth that price. And what makes me really basically infuriated is when I see other agencies who are charging somewhere near what I charge, but don't produce the services that I'm offering and guaranteeing to my clients. So I put together a list of questions that you as an individual can ask in order to vet a podcast agency. And with each of these questions, I'm going to give you my answer and how things look on my end for my clients. You can use it as a comparison. You can use it as a baseline for what you're looking for. But I just want to provide you with total transparency on what a good podcast booking agency should be offering you when you sign up for their services. So one of the first questions that I always have clients ask me is, what is your process? What does it look like from when we sign the contract to when I'm getting interviews and afterwards? And I share my entire process in an intro call. You don't have to sign a contract to know that we're going to have a Google intake form that you're going to complete, that I'm going to stalk you on the back end, and I'm going to gather information and start your media kit prior to us even having the one-on-one onboarding call. There's a lot of work that goes into it ahead of time. So that's part of my process. This is the onboarding process. And then we set up an hour-long Zoom where it's you and me one-on-one. You share your story. It becomes like a therapy session where things that you might not even realize are part of your story come out of you. I've had clients cry during their one-on-one with me, and we really get deep into what has brought them to where they are today. What are they an expert in? What is it that they want to be known for? All of these things are part of the onboarding process for me. And then I take vigorous notes. I'm a pen and paper person, so our one-on-one is with me and my head down. I'm engaging with you, but I'm also taking lots and lots of notes. Once we've done our call, I then create topics for you. And I get very detailed. We talk about how they're unique and they're not going to be generic. So if you talk about marketing, your topic is not going to be marketing tips and tools because that's generic and a million other people can talk about it. So this is all part of my process and why it's important for me to work with you one-on-one and get to know what it is that's your secret sauce that makes you unique and that makes you the expert that stands out from others. So from there, I do my research with podcasts, listen to the episodes, create a skeleton pitch, and the following questions will get more into all of this. But my overall process is that's how I bring you on board, and then we work together from there. So the next question that you should ask is, do I have to provide my own media kit and topics? And there are agencies that require you to provide that to them. My agency is not one. I create your branded media kit so it looks just like something that would have come off your website. It matches everything that you're already putting out into the world. And I create your topics with you. I say with you because you have input in all of this. And I'm not this end all be all in all of this. We're working as a team. So I create these and then you review them and we go from there. Can you provide me with a sample media kit? Absolutely. If an agency has done this before, which I assume they have, if you're looking at their services, then they should have samples that they can provide you. If you have to provide your own media kit, then your friend is going to be Google. But I can provide different media kits of past clients. I have my own media kit as a sample. I can show different variations of how the layout might look depending on what your aesthetic is. And you'll be able to see that the different brand colors come into play, the different fonts. So definitely ask for a sample if they're going to provide you with a media kit. Do you have a say in edits? For me, it's an absolute yes. This is you. This is yours. In the end, I give you all of these tools that you can utilize once our contract is done. If you need to put them on your website, if you're pitching yourself for another opportunity, then you have access to all of this as well. I also want this to really portray you. So I want you to tell me, no, I don't like the wording of this, or this topic is somewhat correct, but let's tweak it a bit because I don't feel comfortable talking about this variation of it. So you absolutely have a say in the edits. Another great question is, do you provide coaching? Now, this can be on your topic creation or it can be interview coaching. I personally provide this coaching. This is part of the whole package deal that you get when you work with me. We work on the topics together, as I've said. We go in depth as to why these are topics that are good for you to speak on, not just for your own sake, but why it's going to attract people to have you on their show and attract listeners. I also work on the interview coaching. I offer that as a standalone service, but I also interview a lot of my clients on my own show. And then from there, I can also work with them on, hey, you missed this part of your story. You didn't mention it, but since I know your story, I was able to prompt you to bring it into the conversation. But at the same time, I'll listen to interviews that my clients do and we'll give them feedback on, this part of your story, you waited until the end, and it's really the hook that should be in the front. So we go over all of that. If you do the standalone interview coaching, then we do it on Zoom, we record it, and I'll give you real-time feedback. So we'll do like a pretend mock one and one that's, here are the questions, because if we know you have a specific interview coming up, I'll listen to episodes and see if there's any kind of questions that continue to come up from the host so that you're fully prepared. Another question is, how do you research podcasts? Now, some might just throw spaghetti at the wall, and I disagree with this wholeheartedly because we want to reach your ideal audience. And in order to do that, there's a lot of research that goes into it, from listening to episodes to reading the description of the show to stalking really the hosts and learning everything that there is about the host to see how we can relate to them. So definitely see if they're researching shows in depth or if they're just kind of putting in a keyword of like life coach and finding any kind of podcast that comes up from that. Are you looking at competitors and where they've been before? Is that a way to research it? And it absolutely can be. Do they just use Apple to research it? Do they use a database? Do they research Instagram hashtags? These are all ways that I research podcasts in addition to the existing Rolodex that I have. Do you listen to episodes before pitching? For me, this is an absolute, because how else are we going to relate personally to every podcast if we've never heard an episode before? I love to relate to the host, either something about myself or my client. And most of the times it's about me. I'll let the host know that this certain episode really resonated with me, and here's why. And I share of myself personally. I think that's really important. And it hits on the fact that I am a person. We aren't just some computer who's spitting out copy and paste emails that it just doesn't matter. There's a real human factor to it. And this is the part of the matchmaking that I'm sharing of myself, my client sharing of themselves, and the host is sharing of themselves. This next one goes right into, do you copy and paste your pitch emails? This is the biggest taboo in my book. It's just, you can tell when someone has copy and pasted when there is no name of the host. I get, hey there. That's not my name. My name's not there. When they mention my podcast name, but that's it. There's no mention of an episode, a specific one. You can tell if it's just literally been pasted in the name of the show, and the rest is just, here's why my client would be a great fit. And it really has nothing to do with my show. It's all about the client. So ask if they do copy and paste, and ask for a sample. I'm all about that. And that's one of the next questions is, can I see a sample of your follow-up, or describe to me what your follow-up process looks like? I have received follow-ups with one word, Bing, B-I-N-G with an exclamation point. That's not a follow-up. That's not even an email. It's not even a sentence. So ask, what is the follow-up process? What does all of that look like? Are you being persistent, or are you being kind and genuine in your follow-up? Do you wrap it up at some point? What does that look like? And I think that you have a right to ask what that looks like, because this agency is representing you. And so if they're sending out an email like Bing, that's not a good representation of you. Let's be honest. I wouldn't want to be represented in that sense. So what does the follow-up process look like? How many follow-ups do you send? How often do you send them? I've said before that in traditional PR, you're sending follow-ups quite quickly because the news is constantly changing. It's constantly getting updated. But in podcasts, it's not. It's something that can take weeks. Sometimes it can take months. So I only do follow-ups every 2 to 3 weeks. There's no follow-up within 2 days, within 3 days, within a week, because now you're just being pesky. So to make sure that your agency knows exactly what it is that is the norm, what's the standard in the podcasting industry. So ask about the follow-up process. How often do they follow up? What does the follow-up email look like? Next is, how do you assist in the booking process? What happens when a host says, yes, I'd love to have your client on? Then what? For me, it's then finding out, how is it that you book the client, the interviews? Do you have a calendar link? Do you have specific dates and times? What is it you need from us? A headshot, a bio, pre-interview questions. And I gather that information, and then I provide it to the client. I let them know which podcast host, what the podcast name is, the link to the show, even though they already have access to all of this in a Trello board that I create for them. But I let them know that this is what it is. This is the topic you're going to speak on. Is it video and audio, or is it audio only? Is the video on, but it's not being recorded? All of these questions. And then the link to the calendar booking. I also ask my clients to let me know what date and time they selected, because I'm also going to track it. And we'll get into that in just a moment as well. But I do assist in the booking process. And, that can be a big deal to handle, because there can be pre-interview questions. So what happens if there are pre-interview questions? I tell my clients up front that I answer them to the best of my ability. Sometimes there are questions such as, what's your favorite motivational quote? And that is not something that I upfront ask my clients. So if I get stuck on a question like that, then I will ask for their input. Otherwise, most of the time, I have all of the answers to a pre-interview that I need from the onboarding of my client, because I've gotten to know my client as well, one-on-one. I know their story. So they trust me to be able to answer these questions for them. Then, do you provide any kind of interview feedback? And I said that at the beginning, that yes, I provide coaching. I want you to sound your best, to do your best, to tell your story the way that you intend for it to be told, to make sure that the hooks are coming out, that, you are being portrayed as the expert that you are, and that you're getting your point across. So I definitely give feedback. I also give feedback when it comes to sharing your interviews, and I'll get to that next as well. But how do you know when an interview goes live? Is the agency tracking it for you? How do you obtain that information? I track all of the interviews that my clients do. I have found that often, and I don't know why, hosts do not let you know when an interview has gone live. So I check every single podcast every single week, once a week, and I will find out if an episode has gone live. I will then reach out to the host if they haven't already contacted us. I'll ask for social media assets, and then I will copy and paste the links that I can find and send them to the client. That way I can also share them and the client can share them. Do you help me repurpose my interviews? Now, I am a huge fan of repurposing, as you know, and I have documents that will help my clients figure out how to repurpose it. I have different resources, different agencies that I can refer them to repurpose their podcast interviews. But absolutely, I help to repurpose them. I want to make sure that they get up on your media page. I want to make sure that you're sharing them in your Instagram stories, but also on your feed and on Twitter and Facebook and everywhere else. So I definitely give guidance on how to repurpose your interviews. A big question I get, and this goes back to the pricing, is how do I measure my ROI with you? Now, this is a tough one because a lot of the ROI is going to depend on the client. Just because I book you an interview doesn't mean that somehow that's going to translate into dollars and cents. The ROI is going to depend on not only booking the interviews, getting on the right shows, but also what is it that you're offering? So this is something else I go in with my clients is, what freebies do you have? What do you have that's going to garner the email addresses of the listeners that you can share with them that's of value? That way you can then nurture them and turn them into clients down the road. This is all going to be how you measure your ROI. Do you get speaking engagements from being on podcasts? Do you get invited to be on other shows because they heard your interview? Are you getting other clients? That's all measurement of your ROI. Now, do you guarantee a certain number of podcast interviews each month? Now, I have the law background, so there's no guarantee in anything. That is like law 101, do not guarantee anything, because then you're on the line for it. But you can ask, what's your average interview bookings every month? And I tell clients that on average, what we aim for, the goal is 2 to 3 interviews a month. But there are times where we're going to get a bunch more. There can be times where we get less. It just depends on, what time of year are we pitching? Does that make a difference? Is it that we're looking to do your book launch? So we actually want everything to happen within a certain period of time. How quickly can a podcast book you? Well, some may be 6 months out. Some may say, come on this week. And it really varies and depends on the host and the show, what their frequency is, what they already have batched and ready to go. So the goal is to book 2 to 3 podcasts a month, and go for even more. But booking does not mean recording. So I may book you 2 or 3 this month, but you're recording them next month, or it could be in 2 months. So it's going to vary. How often will we communicate? I talk to my clients. I say, expect to communicate weekly, but in a lot of cases, it's multiple times a week, especially when the pitches go out, the follow-ups go out, then a lot of communications coming in from other hosts, and I'm sharing that with you. So we go back and forth multiple times a week. If you want to have less communication, that's fine, but I send you real-time emails of when an interview comes in and we need to book it. So usually we communicate once a week. Do you provide a monthly report? I certainly do. I provide a report that tells you how many podcasts were pitched, how many follow-ups were sent, how many were booked, how many are we waiting on dates to be booked, how many went live, which ones went live, how many pitches have gone out since we started working together. My reports also include what the goals were, what the contract says, how many pitches need to be sent within X amount of time, all of that stuff. And then a list of the podcasts that went live that month. So I love a monthly report. I think it's a nice way to just wrap up and see in one clear spot what happened in that month. And the last question I would ask is, do I get access to see who's been pitched? I create a Trello board for every single one of my clients, and they get this for lifetime access. This is theirs to keep. It shows you who I'm going to pitch to, who's been pitched, who's been followed up, who we are waiting on a date from, when one has been booked, when it has gone live. And this is really beneficial because you can see what podcast interviews have gone live. So this is great for your media kit. I put in all of the information about each podcast, from the host's name, the description, the link, the social media following, the contact information. And then when a podcast goes live, the live link also goes in there. So it's a one-stop shop of everything. It gets updated in real time because I'm a type A stickler who just has to have it done. Cards get moved, but you have access to that at all times. So I like to be as transparent as possible. I want my clients to see what they're getting in the service that I provide. What are the benefits? You know, I'm not sitting here saying I'm going to pitch you and then I'm not really pitching you. You can literally see what's been pitched, when they've been pitched, and what the results were. So even if it's a no, there's a note in there as to why it was a no. I just feel that it's so important that you know what exactly you're getting in the service that you're paying for. So I encourage you not to be shy in asking these questions. These are questions that I, as an agency owner, am more than happy to answer. They are questions that I have been asked. Some I haven't been asked, and I think I should be. I'm prepared for an answer, so I'm not afraid of them. But there are other agencies who aren't providing all of this, who aren't representing their clients in a way that I think they deserve to be. So if you're looking at podcast booking agencies to pitch you, then ask these questions. There's a human being on the other side who's sending out these emails. So ask. This is a relationship and it should be mutually beneficial. It shouldn't be a one-way street where you're just paying someone and crossing your fingers for interviews. So that is my transparency on podcast booking agencies. And I just encourage you to really look deeply at who you're working with, who you're choosing to represent you, because it's really important. If someone doesn't like an agency because of the way they come off, then you're going to miss your chance completely on being interviewed on that podcast. So definitely do your homework, ask the questions. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. After all, if they can't answer them, then they're probably not the right agency for you. Know that this is an investment in yourself, in your business, and treat it as you would any other kind of monetary investment. You're not going to buy a stock and just plump down the money. You're going to research the company that you're looking at investing in. So do the same when it comes to a podcast booking agency. And if you're interested in my services, if you liked what you heard, then you can always reach out to me, the MLGcollective.com. It lists all of my services and the pricing there because, again, I like to be transparent. So I even have pricing on my website. Let me know what you think. What have you experienced with podcast booking agencies? Are you ready to launch into one? Do you want to be pitched? And what is it that you want to be pitched for? Why? Look at all of those questions for yourself. Let me know what you think. If you have questions, go hit me up on Instagram, send me an email. I love to hear from you all. And don't be afraid to go pitch yourself because you do have a message that needs to be heard by someone else. Go out there and change the world with your voice.